Well, hi everybody. It is Andrea. I hope everyone is having a really good February. It is interesting out weather-wise. One day it's snowing, the next day it's pouring rain. So I hope everyone's doing really, really well. So the purpose today, and I'm just going to see if I can close this up a little bit here. What we're going to try to do today is something just a smidgen different than we've done in the past. We've spent a lot of time talking about various topics that those of us who are in a very small planning group kind of came up with at the very outset of the work. And so on today's community of practice, what we'd like to do is spend some time digging into some reflection about the community of practice as a tool to help your program and your community support young people on their journey to college career and then ultimately success in life. And then as part of the planning around this community of practice, like I said, we predetermined some of the topics that would be relevant to you and your organization and your community. But after 5 community of practice, I wanted to check in with all of you to see how we can expand on topics that we may have already discussed and what you hope to see from future topics. And there are a lot of chat boxes open, and I will explain them as we go along. But hopefully that will become clear. So I'm going to. And if you are on the phone, which I completely hope you are, if you wouldn't mind muting when you're not speaking, that would be great, just so that we don't get any background noise. And Natasha, I'm getting some information from Stephanie that the line is busy to call in. But there's multiple folks saying that the line is busy. That's giving them a busy signal. Mm-hmm. Would you mind looking into that?
Yep, I can ask about that.
Okay. All right. So here are a few things that I would like to cover today. The first is I know that some of you were able to make it to the Illinois 60 by 25 Network conference. And I'd like to give those of you who were there a chance to add some recap and some thoughts. And those of you who are not there to be able to ask questions about that conference and about the network in general and how it might be able to support your work. Next is exploring new topics, and there are 4 topics that are kind of left in our roster, and those are career pathways into post-secondary, employability skills, work-based learning, and recruitment and messaging. So really spending some time digging into those topics and figuring out what are the right questions as a framework for inquiry that we should be asking, and are there things that we're missing. And then finally exploring previous topics, so sector-based strategies, which we spoke about with Kim Kuchenbrod from Vermilion Advantage, the role of the intermediary, partnership, ownership, and sustainability through employer engagement, and then also setting up a training plan and building career ladders. So wanting to spend time thinking about the previous topics that we've talked about, were there things that we missed when we talked about those topics, and how can we plug those in? And I want to preface the conversation just a little bit today and just say that there may be questions that you ask that I don't have an answer to. And so I want to make sure that that's up front. As many of you know, I'm not an employee of DCO, so there are certain questions I just won't know. But what I will do is collect them and start to think, how can we cohesively begin to answer those questions, making sure that we're connecting all of them to the right resources. And whether that's in an FAQ, some kind of a frequently asked questions folder, if it's in some other kind of resource site, I think we also need to think through about what that looks like. So I just wanted to preface that out there. So before I go on, is there anything else that anyone would like to put on the agenda to talk about? We'll just open that up. You can either type it in or say it out loud. Okay, so we'll kind of go from there. And again, if there's anything that pops up, please, by all means, let me know. So I wanted to start us off with this image that we've looked at before, just to level set. So this is an image that I have pasted on my board above my desk, and that I keep in my computer, and I remind myself of with some frequency. Young people, but particularly the young people that are part of the programs that you generally serve, they're facing an unprecedented array of challenges, and they're forced to navigate a maze of systems and influences, often by themselves. And the work that we all do is trying to change this image into one that reflects more of this. That there's a system of supports in a collaborative that supports young people at the center of the work we're all trying to accomplish collectively. We're philanthropic supports connect to the business sector, which collaborates with the K-12 education system, the post-secondary system, and the adult education system. Where public supports are connected to private supports in really meaningful ways that make sure that young people that are part of child welfare system and the justice systems are receiving the supports they need to also achieve their full potential, right? So this is an image we've talked about before, and I wanted to always kind of keep this in the center of our work. I think it's really easy to get lost in the minutia of what it is that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and this hopefully orients us to the vision of what we're trying to accomplish going forward. So one of the ways that we do this, is through the Illinois 60 by 25 network. The state of Illinois is finding multiple ways to achieve that vision, and one way that communities have come together is around the Illinois 60 by 25 network, in which supports communities to increase meaningful and equitable post-secondary attainment and civic engagement. So the network was created in 2013 by 3 organizations, Advance Illinois, the Student Assistance Commission, and my organization, Education Systems Center. And it was created to support a peer-to-peer action network, and that network gives communities the space and the resources to come together around common goals and to connect local community efforts to state policy, but then also to connect state policy to local community efforts, to make sure that there's a bi-directional mechanism of communication between what's happening on the ground and what's happening at the state level in policy efforts. And this is really centered around Illinois' P20 goal, which is to increase the number of adults in Illinois with a high-quality college and post-secondary credential to 60% by the year 2025. And the network, and I'm going to see if I can get us onto, we'll see. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see. No, you're not going to be able to see the website, and that'll be too discombobulating if I try to get us on it. I encourage you, though, to go onto the network website so you can see a map and where the communities that are kind of doing some of the deep dive work, which we're calling leadership communities, where they're doing this work and how they're doing it. One thing I will say about the network is that for the first four years of this network, the network is now 5 years old, we've really been focused on kind of the traditional education space, so particularly the secondary education space, and its pipeline into the post-secondary space. And what we've realized over the past several years is there's an absence of connectivity around the work that's happening in the opportunity use space. We've really tried to make sure that that comes in to the forefront much more clearly, and that was definitely seen at this year's conference. A lot more work about how do we better connect work that's happening in school and out of school. How do we connect resources for in-school use and out-of-school use to make sure that we're not creating 2 separate systems, rather that we're creating one system that supports and serves all young people. Our theme this year at the conference was scaling for impact. And part of the scaling for impact is really thinking about the role that equity plays in that scaling. I apologize, I am looking for something. So when we think about how we define equity and the role that equity plays, this definition of equity is from the National Equity Project. And thinking about every child receives what he or she needs to develop to his or her full academic and social potential. This equity definition can also be extrapolated to adults. It can also be thought of as a way of thinking, what does every person need in order to achieve their full social potential? And I think that's the work that we're all trying to do. How are we all trying to connect the dots across all of the different sectors that we're attempting to serve so that the young people that we serve are able to achieve their full academic and social potential. So I know that there were some folks that were at the conference, and I would love to open this up to them and think about these questions. What were some of your reflections about the conference? And I've got some folks that are typing. And if there's anyone that's on the line that's able to click in, I would love to hear from you. So Sandra said it was very informative about others' work, right? So Sandra is coming from OAI, and I think it's helpful to it's helpful for that or for that community and that organization to think about how is the work that they're doing reflected in other communities and what lessons can they learn as well. Is there anybody else that's on the line that wants to share about what some reflections about the conference in general? Everyone's feeling very shy today. So I'll kick another question out there. Thank you, Sandra. I'm glad that you like the concept of equity and how that helps us scale, how that helps us think about how we scale. Is there a particular equity challenge that your program is facing right now? If I can kick that question out to all of you. That's okay if no one, it's not to say that everyone attended the conference. I know there were some folks that did, and I wanted to give them a space for reflection so that everyone could learn from them. Go ahead.
So this is Jacob Groby with Manufacturing Renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just wanted to make sure, so you're asking if we see any issues with equity at our school?
Yeah, I mean, are there particular equity challenges that your program is facing right now?
We're at Bowen High School on the south side of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that our students and their community is extremely underserved, and their school is severely under-resourced as well. So on top of the personal challenges that they have to deal with in their life at home, they come to a school that is been on the brink of closing down for many years, and there's a lot of uncertainty around, and it's hard to attract and retain talented educators to be at that school.
Sure.
And instead of really investing in that school and providing resources, providing leadership that is going to inspire students, the community, and people to work there, instead it has been split in half, where half of the literal building of the school is a charter school and half of it is a public high school. Half of it's a private charter school, half of it's a public high school. So to me, it's like mind-boggling that this is something that this is the solution to, it's crazy, because what that has done is basically split the population of the high school. So now the student population is lower, and therefore they get less and less and less funding. So it's a perpetual cycle, and a targeted base. To me, what it looks like from the outside and from what I've seen and witnessed and heard and experienced is that it's a targeted attack to really close it down eventually, and to allow a private charter school to take over.
Yeah. Are there any community members or organizations that the school is able to work with to help support growth there, or is the school a bit of an island?
Well, that's part of what's inspiring about this project that we're doing there. So we, Manufacturing Renaissance, has partnered with a lot of people to invest and help build the brand new manufacturing training classroom that they have there at the school. It's actually the only one, it's one of two in the entire Chicago public school system. And it's the only one on the south side of Chicago. And to me, that's mind-boggling as well, because there's a huge manufacturing industrial corridor all around that area. And yeah, but that's really cool though, because it's a great opportunity for us to get into the school and build up this program, because that is something that, you know, the community, the school are very excited about, and it's, you know, a way to attract, you know, students and to show that you know, this is an actual investment in the community, and we can really build community around this investment, and you know, providing pathway to a middle class job is something that we can all, you know, get around. So yeah, it's really awesome, and I think just having our staff, we've been able to hire an amazing what we call a career specialist, who's like a career counselor with students, and I think just having her there in the school is extremely is a big difference maker, because
Sure.
you know, all these students, they not only need someone to who is a professional, this person has a background in human resources and a master's degree and has worked in the field for a long time, so she knows really a lot about the working world, and has actually grew up in, you know, a situation similar to our students. So she has a unique blend of talent and experience that she can relate to students and also give them very, very professional guidance on their life and their career, which this advice that she's giving to students is not like something that was available to them before. So
Sure. No, I mean, I think that makes perfect sense, and I think that's an excellent example of how you break down some of the equity barriers, right? That the school that is under-resourced, this is a way of actually addressing one of the barriers, which is connection to a social capital that students are able to build as part of preparing for college and career.
Right.
Yeah. Courtney, you raised your hand. I like the little raise the hand.
Oh, yeah. And I apologize. I have a 3-year-old who likes to talk a lot.
That's okay.
In the background. One of the things, the challenges that we are facing is just the fact that for up until about 2 years ago, Methodist College was a nursing school. So it had all Bachelor of Nursing students, which is a different culture than the students that we have as apprentices. So we are sort of dealing with challenges with the faculty in understanding that these are students that they don't necessarily have to have that nursing level of knowledge for some of the classes, as well as the fact that, and even this is just in general with my other medical assisting students, they don't feel like they're fitting in well with this nursing population, because the majority of students are nursing students, and we're trying to integrate them, but it's been a challenge to try to get them. I mean, they're in classes with nurses, they're in a few nursing only classes, in addition to medical assisting, and it's been a challenge for them to relate to the students, as well as the instructors are not necessarily, we're sort of educating them on, okay, this is a different population of students than you've had, and this is how we need to work together to, you know, work through some of these challenges. And the students are also from inner city Peoria schools that didn't necessarily have, I mean, there's some behavioral issues too that we're working with as well. So those are some challenges we are facing here.
Sure. You know, and I'm just thinking about this, there's some information that I think might be really relevant to share around how you build cultural competence as a way of breaking down walls between very disparate groups of people. In your case, and just for everyone's clarification, Courtney is in Peoria, but I think having potentially some resources around how you actually facilitate building cultural competence, and it's actually not as hard as we think it might be. Some of it's about asking students about their own lived experiences and including them in classroom discussions and how you value those experiences in a very different way. And some of that is faculty training, right? If you're shifting gears as a Methodist, as an institution, part of that is potentially faculty reorientation around what that means for them, because they themselves might feel like it's a destabilization, right? As a former faculty member, I can say that shifts in the university framework make everyone nervous, and it can create destabilization. So I think I'm going to write that down as a potential resource around around cultural competency.
That would be great, because I mean, we're trying to work on developing classes that are just with medical assisting students, but we have to have the numbers in order to do that. We can't just we have to have the volume. So, but a few of the instructors are just, or a lot of them are very good with working with our students. One of them has taken the time to, instead of meeting once a month, they meet every week, and she goes over the chapters. She shows them how to make flashcards, and their quizzes have improved 40%. So they're doing well, and the faculty is trying to work with them, but it's also the integration with the students. So any resources would be helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that could be powerful for most programs. Is how can we help our more traditional faculty members and maybe other students start to and the students that we're trying to serve come together around kind of common vision and common goals through different ways that we use language, and I think cultural competency can help us do that. I have a question. Because there's someone who emailed me about the 866 number not working. Natasha, is there a way that you can check in on that again? Or, and I think this is for Eileen Setti. Maybe try it again. I don't try the number again, the 866 number.
I mean, we've had a couple people that are already, that are been able to get in. So
it's okay. Eileen said Eileen is here. So I got it. Okay, so Eileen's there. She said she can't call in, but she's listening. Great. Just want to make sure everyone has the resources they need. So one of the questions that I kind of posed here is, how would a network of partners across the state support your work? And I think to a certain extent, one question that was just answered was on the issue of kind of cultural competency, because I think that's something that many communities address. I'm noodling this idea around the information that was shared about manufacturing renaissance, because I think the idea of a career specialist, someone that acts as a liaison for students as a way to help them navigate the work, is very curious, and I think it's something that's really powerful. Are there other particular ideas about partners or resources that could be helpful in how we support your work? And you can speak up or raise your hand or type, whatever works. And I see that Sabrina is typing. And Sandra made a point earlier on the chat box in terms of kind of lack of information to the underserved. And I wonder if, Sandra, if you wouldn't mind clarifying a little bit, kind of nuancing that a little bit, what kinds of information could be useful for students as they navigate? And in what way would that be useful to be presented to them? Because there's a ton of information out there. It's a question of how we collect it and how we put it together. Okay. Folks that are typing away furiously. So Sandra wrote, many don't know what resources are available and the value of such resources. So I think we'll have to dig in a little bit deeper about kind of what resources all of you feel like your participants need in order to be more successful. Because I think it is often very participant specific, depending on where your participants are at in their education program, what might be of most use to them. So I think that's maybe something for a follow-up question is about the kind of what resources participants might even need. Like, what is it that they're not getting? Because there are an array of resources that are available or that are out there is pretty vast. And Sandra's point is that, in order for equity to be realized, is that folks have to have information to them. So information is a mechanism to achieve equity, right? To create some kind of a level field, I think is an important but not yet complete component to kind of achieving equity. And so that's something I think that we'll have to pick apart a little bit, but I like this idea of it better thinking about what kind of resources. So that's for a follow-up conversation. If that's something that we as a network or DCO as a state agency can help support, I think could be really, really important. Okay, so Sabrina mentions that there's a career specialist that they share with our local one-stop that bridges the gap between services, which is fabulous. They teach career development at the site, and they have case managers that go to campus and meet with instructors and then meet with youth weekly to carry out the ASAP curriculum, I don't know what that is, to support them as they're going through those post-secondary courses. So the points of contact with the students weekly is necessary for them. So I think that's another really important point is this notion of kind of point of contact. And Courtney, you just mentioned that as well as the faculty member that's choosing to meet with the students weekly as a way of maintaining that point of contact. The career specialist through Bowen High School, the Manufacturing Renaissance, that acting as a point of contact. That's a really excellent point, that this point of contact, some orientation point, some adult, a caring adult that is acting as a mechanism through which students get information and a mechanism through which they're able to address challenges. I think that's an incredibly important piece. So we'll get back to other folks and some of their comments. One thing that I wanted to do, because I think that we've spent 5 sessions now on the community of practice kind of digging into topics around career ladders and around building partnerships and sector-based strategies on career pathways. Some of the topics that we've teed up are out there, and I want to make sure that as we're digging into these topics, A, that we're framing them correctly, and B, that we've aligned the right resources to share with you so that you get the most out of the time that we have together. So the 4 topics that we kind of have teed up in our queue for the next 4 community of practice sessions are career pathways into post-secondary, employability skills, work-based learning, and recruitment and messaging. And I'm going to kind of tease those apart here. And what I'm hoping is that those of you who are on the phone and have the capacity to speak, by all means, please speak up. If not, pop it in the chat box, and we're just going to kind of keep moving through this a little bit. So one of the topics that we have in our queue is career pathways into post-secondary. So as we're building career pathways, whether it's in the secondary system or in an out-of-school system, ostensibly the idea is to create a career pathway that is stackable into a post-secondary situation so that you can address any kind of other needs and prepare students for either an exit into career or exit into additional post-secondary. So the question as a framework for inquiry is, how is your community preparing program participants, sorry, there's a missing word there, to transition into or connect to other post-secondary opportunities? And post-secondary opportunities can mean a credential, it can mean a short-term training program, it can mean four-year institution, it can mean community college, it can mean any of those things. But is there a plan, I guess it's a better way of asking it, is there a plan for moving students through post-secondary or giving them the option or the pathway through which they can float into post-secondary? And I want to know, as you contemplate that, are there resources that need to be addressed? Is there additional information that you need to know about some of that work that would help support participants, and what else are we missing about that question? So if you have the ability to speak on the phone, I hope you will. If not, I've got a lot of folks typing, and we'll read as quickly as we possibly can. But is there anyone that's on the phone that wants to pop up? Okay. So Natasha, Stephanie said that does not have volume even through the headset. I apologize, folks, if there's a technical issue.
I don't know. Other people, I mean, there's other people that are on the line that are listening through.
I don't know either. No, it's okay. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening. Stephanie, would it maybe even help if you kind of clicked out and then tried back again? But that folks typing, and just as a few plugs from our last conversation, Courtney also mentioned that they have an on-site therapist the apprentices meet with, and that Michael mentions that they have partnered with a person from the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, which helps first-generation students, which is great. The Illinois Student Assistance Commission is a really excellent resource for helping students navigate the kind of getting into college process. They have workshops all across the state, and they also have the ISAC core members, which are in communities all across the state, and those are near-peer mentors who can help young folks think about kind of their work in getting prepared into entering post-secondary institutions. As we contemplate kind of that career pathways into post-secondary, the one thing I want us to think about is this notion of on and off ramps. And the thing that we never want to do is to create a career pathways program that's terminal, that is it kind of has a real truncated endpoint, that there should be a ladder into something else, to some kind of a stackable program. And so I want to just think, as you prepare for that, as you plan for that, is there additional information that would help you to support participants? And are there other particular resources or ideas that you can share that might be of real help? Courtney mentions that the students have already earned a CNA certification, so they're working with Unity Point Hospitals, where they'll be working on their medical assistant certificate. So there's a plan going forward, and hopefully there are additional on-ramps for other post-secondary possibilities going forward, that there's some kind of a stackable model that's in place, or that's going to be built in place. Was there someone that wanted to share on the phone? Okay, so I'm going to send all of these questions out as well through an email. So if nothing's coming to you right now, please, by all means, just go ahead and send it through email as well. So another issue is employability skills. So as part of the Post-Secondary Workforce Readiness Act, which I covered in a certain extent last session, our last community practice session, is the College and Career Pathway endorsements. And part of that work has been working with employer partners from across the state to work on competencies that are both industry-specific and cross-industries, such as essential employability skills, and that is such as communication, timeliness, things of that nature. And one of the questions as a framework for inquiry that I've had is, how do communities capture and potentially train to employer needs around employability skills? And one thing that I would like to do is have a program present to all of you about some of the work that they're doing and how they're plugging that in. But also would like to share with you some of those employability skills and competency statements that have been created as part of the Post-Secondary Workforce Readiness Act to see, A, how they resonate with you, and B, how they would be implemented in your program. So from an employability skills perspective, are we asking the right questions? What else are we missing? Is there additional information that you think would help support participants? And again, if you want to type that, if you want to speak up, I hope that you're able to. From an employability skills perspective, how is this being addressed in your community? And if not, what resources would help you to be able to address it?
So this is Jacob Groby again with Manufacturing Renaissance.
Hi.
Hey. So our program is a partnership between Manufacturing Renaissance and the organization I work for, which is Youth Guidance. And our big program is the Becoming a Man program, the BAM program, which is a social emotional learning program that's a mixture of mentorship, youth engagement, cognitive behavioral therapy, and counseling, and rites of passage. And it's a hybrid of those things. And that's what kind of makes us unique, is that most of our students are going through BAM or working on womanhood, which is like the women's version of it. And so they're getting that social, emotional learning, that counseling support, while we also have a career specialist who is drilling down on the employability skills. We work with MHA Labs here in Chicago. I would check into them because the whole, what are those essential employability skills? Leslie Beller, who's created that whole thing, she really has drilled that down and has had, so many, meetings and interviews with employers. And I really love what they've developed, or what she's developed. And she's partnered with One Summer Chicago here, and so One Summer Chicago does that as well. And she really makes it, it's very scientific, but then it's also like the materials that we are able to use with students to coach and train and learn about these employability skills are very youth-centric and culturally competent, as you may say, and all those things. So I would definitely check those out. I feel like what she's doing, that work, man, that should really be on a national level and shared and used by everybody, at least in our own state. So I'd highly recommend that. But I guess I just wanted to say is that I think the thing that's missing from post-secondary pathways work is just making sure that students really do have that full circle of support, that they are getting their basic needs met, that they have, the ability to get food on the table, to have transportation, to have professional clothing. Working with our students, I'm always having to go buy shoes, help them with bus passes, and occasionally buy a gift card so that they can buy groceries. And the way that the process works with many of these grants is so convoluted, and there's so much paperwork involved that I just pay out of my own pocket a lot of times for bus passes, because it's not worth my time to go through the process. And so I think that there's a lot of good intention with maybe policymakers to make sure that, dollars are used wisely and whatnot.
Yeah.
But what it's created is that people in this youth workforce development field spend more time doing paperwork and case notes than they do actually working with the student on what they need. So.
Well, and I think that's a really important point, and that's something I know that Jacob, you brought this up before in one of our community practice sessions, and it's something I did address with DCO, is that is there some way of having some kind of discretionary funds set aside for support for students, whether it's transportation. I know that someone had talked about housing, bus passes, getting a driver's license, things of that nature. I think those are all incredibly important concerns. And the fact of the matter is that our programs can't necessarily address all of those things, but if we want students to be able to get to employer sites and they don't have bus fare, that's just a very real and practical concern, and one that we as adults have to figure out a way to address. And I wish I knew the answer. Go ahead.
This is Natasha from Failing. Just to kind of piggyback on the transportation, sometimes it is pretty difficult because perhaps our youth has a car, but they need gas, and so like just those certain policies of being able to, distribute gift cards, whether it's $25 or $10, so that they're able to at least put gas in their cars in order to be able to access those hiring events or community fairs or those interviews are pretty important too. And sometimes transportation, it does get a little bit hard to keep up with, especially if you have quite a lot of youth. And that documentation and the sign-offs and the bus pass forms, it does get a lot as a case manager. We do push a lot of paperwork. So sometimes it would be nice if there was an easier way to kind of document that, whether it be online, or there's like a tracking number that we can just key in and say, okay, this person was distributed $25 on this date. But the paperwork and as well as enrolling that service every time that it's distributed it does become a lot, but I guess it's just, what you have to do as a case manager. But it would be nice if there was an easier way to kind of plug that information in so that you can just do it, click it, and say that you did it and document it, and then be able to, serve another youth that may need that.
Yeah, no. I think that's a really good point. Is there some way to create a system whereby it's easier to track those dollars as they're spent? I think that's a really important consideration.
And then as far as with,
go ahead. No, please.
And just as far as with helping with employment, I generally do a lot of one-on-ones with my youth because, and I stated this before when we had our TA session the first time, that I think that's something that's really needed, and possibly other organizations have it, but it would be nice if there was a therapist or a counselor that could be written into some of the grants, because sometimes just starting with that youth mentor is so important. They can have all the resources that we can possibly give them, but if they don't know how to personally, kind of navigate emotionally their emotional issues as well as just problem-solving issues or even dealing with trauma, sometimes that's a lot to deal with too before they're even ready to become employed, or the fact to be able to stick with their employment once they get it if they don't know how to handle those barriers when they get home or when they get back into the streets. I found that with some of my youth of just kind of trying to keep them engaged in the program. Some of them, may have some issues when they get home or in their community, and just trying to just help them even problem solve day-to-day issues that get in the way of them coming to training or get in the way of them going for an interview or sticking with their OJT. Sometimes it's a bit difficult too, but if we had a case manager and maybe even like a therapist that was like written into the grant, sometimes I think that would be helpful for them to have just more support even with that, because sometimes as a case manager I have a lot of kids to provide services to, and sometimes you want to allot that time that particular youth needs, and it would just be nice if that additional support was there for them too.
Yeah. Well, and I know that Courtney mentioned that they have an on-site therapist, and I'm wondering if that's the person that's attached to the hospital. And if it is possible to somehow bake that into a grant. I mean, I don't know why it wouldn't be if it's supporting youth development in some way. So that's definitely something I will look into. And I think, frankly, is a good point. Before we move on from employability skills, I mean, we're kind of just addressing kind of the basket of needs, and I think maybe employability skills is a little too narrow. It's kind of more addressing student needs, both from a social emotional perspective and also from an employability perspective. I think Jacob's point is right. both social emotional skills and work around employability skills is really helpful. And we've worked closely with MHA Labs in the past, and I know that MHA Labs is working with programs and communities across the country. So that's something, if that's a resource that's useful, we will make sure that we plug in with Leslie and see what we can do to share some of those resources more broadly. Before we move on from here, is there anything else that we want to add around employability skills or kind of social emotional development? And again, the book's not closed on it. It's going to just in the essence of time because we're kind of running to the edge of our time frame. From a work-based learning perspective, this is always really, really tricky because you're talking about getting employers to sign on and actually having young people in the workspace or providing some kind of work-based learning resources to young people. And one way that we can help do that is to build a continuum of participant and employer engagement. So some mechanism by which employers can say, okay, I'm not ready for an internship, but I can do job shadowing. I'm not ready for an apprenticeship, but I can do a career fair, right? So some kind of a continuum of employer engagement whereby employers are able to get hooked, quote unquote, hooked into the program and into the work before they're ready to jump full whole hog into having an apprenticeship or an internship program. So that's kind of a framework for inquiry for me, and that's something that I would like to share with all of you about communities that have developed a continuum of employer engagement and what that's looked like. But what else are we missing when it comes to employer engagement? What are some components that you think would be really helpful to either understand or to have resources around? And if you have the ability to speak on the phone, again, I encourage you to do it. And we've got folks furiously typing.
This is Peoria Core, Jamila Wilson.
Hi, Jamila.
Hi. So one of the things that we are trying to incorporate is putting the core members in front of employers by inviting them in during our professional development days to talk about what they do and how what we're doing here in the program relates back to that, sort of kind of giving a little bit of real-world experience for our core members by introducing them to professionals in the field. So that has been really helpful, but it also gives the employers an opportunity to see the caliber and quality of our core members as well.
That's great. And what's been the reaction from employers, can I ask?
So far, they've been impressed. We are working to build more intentional relationships with the core and the professionals. There have been a number who have expressed interest in hiring once the core members have ended. They're also receiving an industry-recognized credential, which will make them a valuable asset, especially as Peoria builds out its green infrastructure practice. Our core will be coming out with, at this time, the only industry-recognized credential around green infrastructure practice.
That's great. That's excellent. So the employers are actually telling you that this is a credential that they're interested in having and they don't currently train to.
Definitely, and
that's great.
And as the city begins to bid out for construction and maintenance of the green infrastructure construction, they're sort of adding an incentive to the RFP for labor to have this credential.
That's great. Is there any incentive that the city is providing that would encourage employers to hire your program participants?
Well, it will boost the competitive.
It will boost that? Okay.
Contractors bid if they had someone with this credential.
Great. See, I think that's a really great way, too, that the system starts to support. It's good for the city to do that, it's good for the employers to do that, and it's good for the program participants to have that, right? So it creates a triangulation, and that's a really natural way to start to build a system around that student. So it's a really, really natural way. So some of the folks pointed out that there's a professional development series that presents career pathway resources, professionals from the field, and opportunities for members to gain leadership and development skills. I think that's phenomenal, and I would love to hear more about that, Jamila. And then Tracy actually indicated that there's some interest in finding out what some of the tax benefits to hiring our students would be good for engaging with skeptical employers. And I think that would be a really excellent thing. And I think some of that is location specific, some of that depends on the county that you're in. But it would be a really helpful conversation to have, and I will look into who might be the right person to address that particular question. What other information do you think would be really helpful for you from a work-based learning perspective to support participants? Or are there resources that you want to share? If you think of something, by all means, pop it in the chat box, and again, I will be sending all of this out via question. The last topic that's kind of in our docket is around recruitment and messaging, and communication comes up all the time as an issue about how you onboard people into this work, how you onboard faculty and staff into this work, and how you sell program participants on this work, right? And this is something that the folks at Young Invincibles, I know Erin Steve is on the I can see her is a participant in this. This is something that we're planning on doing together, because this is the work that they've been doing a tremendous amount of work on, is, how do you communicate messages around career pathways, and particularly around apprenticeships, and what kind of resources do you need in order to do that? The question that I have is, how does this help support sustainability over time, right? If we speak with one voice around career pathways and around apprenticeships, and we start to repeat that message, how does that help us support sustainability, whether that's with our employer partners, with our philanthropic partners, our non-for-profit partners, our community organizations. And so as you've done this work, the question I would have is, what have been some of the stumbling blocks for you in communicating the message of what you're trying to accomplish? What have been some of your recruitment issues? And then more broadly, what kind of resources would help you to be able to communicate what it is you're trying to do? I'll just throw that out there. And you can either type it or, by all means, see it on the phone. So I'll say one of the things that's come up in some of my other conversations with other community partners is the issue of onboarding. And I think it was Courtney that you had mentioned this earlier, this issue of onboarding staff and faculty around the whole concept of career pathways and the whole concept of working with different populations of students. And one request that's come in from multiple places across the field is around some kind of communication resources that lets faculty understand the why career pathways, why apprenticeships, because there is so much stigma attached to both that it's often not clear to faculty members why they're being asked to do some of this work. It feels like a revisioning of the organization of the institution, and it's often a very difficult sell. And so one of the things that I've been working on is how you actually communicate this in the higher education space. But I think there are other communication issues as well, and part of that is to community organizations, is how do you communicate what role community organizations play in the development of career pathways and the implementation of career pathways and that sort of thing. So, and then finally, one of the key issues is around participants, is how do you actually get participants to play in the sandbox, and how do you recruit participants into these programs. And so I know there's a few folks that are typing, but if there's anyone on the phone that wants to speak about that, I encourage you to chat about it now. Lots of folks that are typing.
This is Natasha from Phalanx. I do have a question for some other partners. Is anyone else facilitating a TABE test prior to their applicants getting into the apprenticeship program?
Did you say the TABE test?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's a question for other folks.
Yeah, this is Jamila in Peoria. We do administer the TABE test. In our first cohort, we were just kind of learning the importance of sort of eligibility that the TABE test has sort of played within enrolling our students. So it was something that we didn't do until the latter part. But now as we prepare to recruit our second cohort, it will be one of the first things we have our students complete.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, some of the challenges that I've had with primarily our first group is that I definitely had to do a lot of tutoring just to kind of help our youth kind of brush up on those, basic math and literacy skills. And so I think sometimes, depending on what type of program they're going into, and they definitely need to be literate in math or in reading, I think the challenges with the TABE test is that sometimes our youth may not be able to formally articulate that they know how to measure something, but if you put them and ask them to measure this door and come back with another prototype of it, they'll be able to do it. But some of them just have that kind of, hardship of like showing that, they're competent on a piece of paper, but rather they're very good hands-on. And so I think that that's kind of been a challenge for me, is just kind of having that TABE test and having them be able to score the 9.0, because they do have to do construction math and measure and do different things like that. But some of them may not know how to articulate that formally, but they are pretty good with their hands. So, yeah, that's one thing as far as recruiting.
Well, and so I think that there looks like there's a lot of folks that administer the TABE test. And I guess my question is that, and I think that I remember somebody, and I think it was from Peoria, who mentioned this before, that for students who don't score high enough on the TABE test, that there's a community organization that works with them on math and literacy skills in order to get them to where they need to be in order to participate in the program. And I'm wondering about that as a resource, because it strikes me that in order for students to be successful in certain programs, they do need to have certain math and literacy skills, right? And I think Sandra makes the point here that it's a really good indicator of who will be able to complete and succeed in the program, because the last thing you want is for someone to come in the program and then not be able to succeed because of something that could have been avoided. And so that is a real struggle. So one way, and this is something I think this would be a great topic, is partnering with community organizations for whom addressing remedial literacy and math needs is part of their central mission, could be a really great, and that could be a post-secondary institution, that could be a secondary institution, or it could be a church. Whatever mechanism that you can connect to in the community to get the student in the center of that full circle, that could be a way as a pre-program to get students ready to participate in the next cohort of participants. So that's something I would like to look into. And if anyone has any support, and I think that was Jamila, she said they've utilized a drop-in literacy program that's provided supplemental academic support services. So that, I think, could be a really great answer to that question around if you do use the TABE test as a measure of feasibility for them to be able to succeed in the program, what resources are you able to provide for them should they not be able to pass that?
Yeah, we have a class. We have a GED class that's kind of free to the public. So if they don't do well in that particular TABE test, and they can participate in that class to brush up on their skills. As well as we do have other programs, so a lot of times the youth will be highly motivated to get in YCAP, but once they don't pass the TABE test, after a couple of times, it's, they may not be self-motivated to go to that class, every Thursday. But other than that, if they're not interested in doing that, I mean, we do have other programs that I refer them to. that are work-related and do have training dollars. But just particularly for the YCAP program, sometimes that can kind of be a little barrier to get them to come back and get help.
Sure. Sure. No, it makes sense. Yeah. It makes sense, right? And ultimately, students are going to they're going to need to want to do this, right? There is a limit to the amount of pulling that can be done. And so I think that if the resources are made available and it's accessible, then that maybe is as a piece to the puzzle. And there's a lot of really great comments in this about kind of how recruitment occurs, right? The word of mouth is probably one of the more common recruitment mechanisms. And I'm curious about that word of mouth recruitment, like what could be done to support that, right? So if someone says, yeah, I got this awesome program, here's a website, or I've got this awesome program, here's an app. I'm just curious if that's something that, from your program participants, is that something that would be supportive, or if that's kind of a non-starter. And you don't have to answer that now. That's just kind of one of the niggly questions in the back of my mind. So I'm looking at the time, and we've really hit the edge of our time. I think I've got a really good understanding of some of the pieces of the puzzle that could really support your work over the next 4 community practice sessions. So what I'm going to do as part of my action steps is I'm going to pull together the notes from this, send this out along with some follow-up questions, and then I will hopefully hear back from those of you who are able to participate. Just shoot me some ideas, and they can be phrases, bullet points, whatever, so that Erin and I can support the development of a really comprehensive session around recruitment and messaging, and I can develop some really comprehensive sessions around career pathways into post-secondary, as well as other topics that we've discussed. So I will do that, and I'll try to do that very quickly so that we can kind of keep our momentum going. There's been really great participation on this call through the chat box, and I think that's really wonderful. Courtney and Jim did ask some additional questions around customer withdrawals from a program, and then as well as to find out if a client received services or dropped out before services began. I will look into that. I don't have the answers to those questions, but I will look into that and figure out who is the right person to ask that question to, and then get back to you. All right, are there any lingering questions kind of for the good of the order before we sign off for the day? All right, guys, this was really great, super helpful. I appreciate all of the participation and the really great information that you've all shared. My hands always get super tired when I'm on one of these calls because I do a lot of writing. So thank you very much for all of your participation.